So we have a new Maamar, and it's called Sihiye Mishakeila, which is a Maamar of the Rebbe. This Maamar was said in 1952. My brother-in-law was like, learn this Maamar. He has a particular connection to it as his family's from Russia, and this Maamar, 1952, somehow made it into Russia, and it was, think about the only Maamar of the Rebbe that they had throughout the Soviet Union. So it's a Maamar that they studied again and again and again, so you felt a very deep connection to it, aside from what the Maamar itself is. You also see it's 1952. The previous Rebbe passed away in 1950. So we'll say, the Rebbe became Rebbe in 1950, but he officially assumed the leadership in 1951. 1951 is the first time the Rebbe said a Maamar, on the yahrzeit of Yud Shvat the following year, and the very famous Maamar of Basil Gandhi. 1952, it was Shas Mevarchim for Chodesh Adar, for the month of Adar, and Parshas Mishpatim. This is about like a year and a couple later. It should be about February, March-ish time that this would have been said. So it was said on Shabbos, so there's not a recording of it, but there are people who say that hearing this Maamar made them a chassid of the Rebbe. This is what really clinched it for them, that this is now the Rebbe. The Rebbe got very emotional saying this Maamar, to the extent that there was one part where he had to pause, and he was just crying. There's something very powerful about the Maamar. There's something very distinct about this Maamar. There's one version of the Maamar, but there's two kind of versions of the translation. They're pretty similar, but some of the sources, the Maamar is the Maamar, it has its footnotes, but sometimes, according to the translation you're using, they're supplemented with other footnotes. So also check here if you want to find more information about things, etc. So who knows what will be. Again, the Maamar is the Maamar, but it's just supplemental things to help us understand what's going on within the Maamar. The subject that's going on in this Maamar, the Rebbe takes a pasuk, or actually two pasukim from the Torah, two verses of the Torah the Rebbe is going to focus on, and even though there's a very kind of literal meaning of what the pasuk is, it's a clear literal meaning, the Rebbe is going to take it and we're actually going to go on a whole journey, a spiritual meaning of what the verses are speaking of. The beginning has question, answer, never mind, and then new question. That answer is not good enough. New question, new answer, new question, new answer. So there's going to be a whole build up before we're going to get to, where we're going with the Maamar. But essentially what we're going to look at here is that what does it mean? If you'll serve God, if you'll serve me, then these are the blessings that will come to you. And what we're trying to figure out is, what does it mean that we serve God? Because service implies that God needs something from us. Can we actually do something that's going to affect God? Does our service actually make a difference? That's part of what the back and forth is. Maybe on this level it does, maybe on this level it does, or actually maybe who knows what it actually means. That's what the discovery of it is going. So that's why even though we're using these verses that have very clear literal explanations for them, we're not going to focus on that as much as taking this now on the whole spiritual journey. Good. Okay, so here we go. Sihiye Mishakeila. The two verses that we're looking at, the verse where the Maamar gets its name from is actually the second verse. We'll do it in the order that the Maamar does it in. So the first verse is Sihiye Mishakeila v'akar bartzecha es mispar yamecha amale. There will be no bereaved or barren woman in your land. I will fill the number of your days. Say no bereaved or barren woman. Another way that they say is that there will be no miscarriages. No woman will have a miscarriage. No woman will be barren in your land, and I will fill the numbers of your days. This is a blessing that Hashem is promising. The verse that comes before that is Vavatem es avai elokechem v'rach es lachmecha v'esmemecha v'siresi machla mikirbecha. And shall serve avai elokechem, and it will bless your bread and your water, and I will remove illness from your midst. So that's really the first verse. The first verse is serve God, and God will bless bread and water, as in your sustenance, basically, and I'll remove all illness. Following that, there will be no woman who has a miscarriage, there will be no barren woman, and I will fill the number of your days. This is what the verses say. Serve God, and all these blessings will come to you. So when we look at what the verses are saying, there's three fundamental blessings, three fundamental brachos that are being granted, that are going to be promised in abundance. Looking at the verses, that's from the first verse. I'm going to bless your bread and your water. That's a bracha for parnasa, and for sustenance, for livelihood. The fact that you will have what to sustain yourself with, that is an all-encompassing blessing of livelihood. Not only will sustenance be as you need, so it's not just that you'll have enough, but it's also going to be in true abundance. The next thing, it says, Vasiresi machla mikarbecha, es mispar yamecha amale. It's saying a few words from each of those verses. Vasiresi machla mikarbecha, I will remove illness from your midst. Es mispar yamecha amale, I will fill the number of your days. That is a blessing for life and for health. Not only will there be no illness, but also long life. Those are two blessings. That means it's not just that you're not going to get sick, but you're going to have an abundance of life, as in you'll have a long life. Someone can have a very healthy life and it's short. Someone can have a very long life and it's a sickly life. So here you'll have health and also longevity. The third thing, Sihiye Mishakeila bakar. There'll be no woman who miscarries or a barren woman, and this is a blessing for children. Not only will children be born and survive through infancy, but they're also going to thrive. That's why a lot of times when you look at life expectancies from back in the day, it's not that nobody ever lived past a certain age, except just because infant mortality rates were so high, so that often skews the numbers. Because once a person could live past a certain point, then the likelihood of having a longer life was much higher at that point. Versus today, which thank God we expect most children to live. Thank God it's not as common for birth to be as dangerous as it used to be. Thank God for that. Giving us a verse. This is actually from Parshas Miketz. This is what Yaakov Avinu says. This is all within the whole part with the brothers and Joseph going back and forth. So first you think Joseph's gone, and then when they go, and the viceroy says, oh, who are you 10 sons over here? You guys are all spies. Bring me back your other brother that you speak of. And then to do that, they have to leave one of the brothers there. So they have to leave Shimon there. And then they go back and they bring Benjamin, and they go back with Benjamin. And then he takes Benjamin, and Judah says, we're not leaving here without Benjamin. This whole situation. So within this whole back and forth, Yaakov uses the words of V'shilach lechem es achichem acher v'es Binyamin v'ani kasher shachalti shachalti. Okay, the Hebrew doesn't have the whole. This is what the verse is saying. May the Almighty God grant you compassion before the man, and he will release to you your other brother and Benjamin. And as for me, as I am bereaved, bereaved. It's just looking at the word of shachalti, which is the same root as the word of Mishakeila. They have the same letters there. You see the shin, kaf, and lamed are the same. And it's understanding this to mean this idea about children also thriving. Yaakov is calling himself that he's bereaved. He's using this language here, so that's why we're looking at how we translate the verse like this. We're saying it's not just that children will be born, but that they're going to survive that and they're going to thrive. Because Yaakov thought that one of his children passed away while he was still in his lifetime. This is the language that's being used here. Now, we're not looking at what it's specifically promising in the verses, as far as in the physical blessings. And we're going to see some of it that it's going to be brought in with this sort of stuff. And there's so much more to this that the Maamar is not going to cover because it's a whole topic unto itself about where the blessings and what's going on with all this kind of stuff. So that's why we're not going to that. As much as we might have questions for that, the Maamar is not covering that. The Maamar is going to look at what does this mean in spiritual terms. First, we're going to see a little definition in physical terms, but really the focus of the Maamar is what does it mean in spiritual terms. So if you look at it, it says, Lo Sihiye Mishakeila, there's not going to be anybody bereaved or barren, etc. It can be understood in two different ways. Either it's a command, you shall not be bereaved, you shall not be barren, or it's also seen as a promise, as in, I promise that none shall be bereaved or barren. Amen, so shall it be. So now that we're looking at this, wait a second, there's two ways of translating it. The verse in the Hebrew is kind of open-ended in the way that it's written, so which one is it? Is it a command or a promise? Especially because it's a command. Women definitely don't choose this. You're going to command it what's going on here. Now if it's a promise, we like this promise. We would like to have this promise. So it's kind of taken both ways. When someone does what's dependent on him to fulfill the command, then Hashem promises that such undesirable circumstances won't occur. The stipulation is, as in, God has the command about there should be no bereaved or barren, etc., but you have to do what you're supposed to do, and then God has to do the rest. Yes, there are certain things that are out of our control, but the parts that are in our control are things that you must do. What is the thing that you must do? You have to serve God. You do you, and God has to do what he has to do. And that's where the promise comes in. The command comes from you doing your part, and the promise comes in from God doing what his part is. Now, an interesting question comes up. According to the Gemara, the brachas for sustenance, health, and children, which these three are always pinpointed, parnasa, life/health, and children, these are the three pivotal blessings of life. When all three of those are aligned, then you've basically got whatever you need. The most important things of life. If you can provide for yourself and you have good health, there's healthy children, then everything is exactly as it needs to be. And everything else is totally secondary to all that. That's why we're also focusing on these are the blessings that Hashem is promising to us. Here it's saying if you serve God, then these blessings will come to you. The Gemara, though, tells us that these blessings from the outset are actually not dependent on someone's merits. As in, your service doesn't necessarily affect them. What actually decides that you're mazel? Yet the verses imply otherwise. We're having a contradiction here. First, we had one question of, we're promising these three things. Is it a command or a promise? And we already addressed that one. Now we have a new question. Wait a second. You're telling us that our actions are actually going to influence these things, but according to Gemara, we can't actually influence these things. These are things that are set with the mazel, and that's it. The answer that we have is, no, it's the abundance in these brachos. So according to whatever brachos you're getting, the abundance of it is actually dependent on your divine service. We're expanding to eventually say, what does our divine service actually impact? What are we doing here? What is the point of all of this? Here are some references. This is actually from Bereshis Rabbah. This is actually not reference to the Maamar. This is one of the footnotes that are supplemented in one of the second translations that I used. From Bereshis Rabbah, this is actually talking about the idea of what is a mazel. So if you remember, we learned about this in Michamocha. The grass has the mazel that hits it, says to grow, and that's the stars. And if you go up high enough, then you get the rooster, and you get the angel, and you get the attribute. Do you remember that whole system over there? So when we say that it's fixed in the mazel, say mazel tov, we kind of mean good luck, great blessings, tidings upon you, but that's not actually what it means. The mazel that we say, it comes from like drip nozel to like drip down, that divine blessings are dripping down to us. Mazel is also a reference to the constellations, because the constellations are kind of the pathway, the tool that God uses to send blessings down. The idea of that, the constellations are kind of fixed, and this is the way it is. It's set up within the universe. So if you say that this is what the person's mazel is, then that means that this is not something you can necessarily affect. To be able to affect something like this, God forbid, it's been decided that God forbid someone's not going to have one of these blessings. In theory, there's a way to change it, but sometimes that means there has to be a trade-off. There's a whole story about the Baal Shem Tov. I think had done that for somebody. I think he's very wealthy, but he wanted children, so the Baal Shem Tov somehow switched it out for him. So he became very poor, but then he had children. You're talking about very great tzaddikim obviously affecting this kind of stuff. But us on our basic level, certain things that are said are not necessarily things that we could affect. Ultimately we say, who knows, and always pray and anything could happen kind of idea. And you never know what mitzvah might be a game changer. This is from Bereshis Rabbah, the Medrash on Bereshis. Barsira said, Hashem produced drugs from the earth with which the physician heals the wound and with which the pharmacist mixes his compounds. That actually has nothing to do with anything. I just put it in there for funsies. Rabbi Simon says, there is not a single blade of grass that does not have a mazel or a constellation in the firmament, as in a heavenly force or an angel is in charge of it, that strikes and it says here, grow. This is what we looked at Michamocha. What does it mean, an angel of the grass? And there are some angels that are the leaves that are shorter lives and the angels with the longer lives. But basically all your blessings are channeled through the spiritual source of things, etc. So that's what we mean by a mazel. This is what is written. Do you know the rules of the heavens? Will you establish its dominion on earth? Domain on mishtar on earth is an expression of being in charge. Shoter. When you tie the chains of the Pleiades or untie the reins of Orion, Rabbi Chanina Bar Papa and Rabbi Simon said, Pleiades renders fruits delicate and Orion draws it out from knot to knot. It causes the fruits to grow to full size. That is what is written. Will you bring out Mazaro in its season and guide Ursha with its sons? Rabbi Tanchuma said, it Mazarot is a constellation that softens Memazer, the produce. Okay, I gave you a whole paragraph there from Bereshis Rabbah as usual, and it's really just for the one line that there's not a blade of grass that doesn't have a mazel that says grow. And the mazel is actually an angel / a heavenly source that channels the blessing, channels the divine light, sustenance, nurture, etc. to every entity. We all have our spiritual channels. Okay, as far as astrology goes in Judaism, there are the zodiacs. We do have that. Oh my God, Rambam, Maimonides, has a whole explanation about the way the universe works. That's because for there to be Rosh Chodesh, you have to know where the moon is going to be and when. You have to really understand the way the solar system. The joke is not a solar system, it's the Earth system. You have to really understand the way the Earth system works. And the things that are there is so contrary to what we learn now. I was laughing because I looked at it, I've been going back and forth with my cousin talking about it. Basically, Galileo just introduced more lies into everything. He didn't discover truth, he just more lies. And obviously, if the Torah says it, I know the Torah's, we have to figure out how to get there. I know the Torah's truth. Just because I don't know how we get there yet doesn't mean it's not yet to get there. So there is an idea of astronomy. Astronomy is a real thing. Astrology, we don't believe in binding ourselves to some sort of mystical magic. For you to go and look at your horoscope is not a very Jewish situation. Each mazel does have certain attributes to it. Actually, I was speaking to someone once and he gave me this whole thing and I don't remember a lot of what he said. It was interesting. So I'm sorry I don't remember it. Each month has a mazel. That is a real thing. The month of Tishrei, for example, is Moznaim, which is a scale. There are certain attributes and dynamics that are highly at play in those months. You have a whole thing about the day of the week. Someone who's born under Mars. Person will be a blood person, could be. That person could be a murderer or they could become like a mole or a shochet. These things are all at play. Now the thing is that we believe that a Jew is not bound by a mazel. So that means that just because these are high dynamics available doesn't mean that it necessarily dictates our course. Which is why we don't look at the horoscope and like, oh, this is how my day is going to go. Oh, this is what it says about me. That's not true. You have a divine soul in you that allows you to break out your limitations. We're not bound by anything. So you might say, oh, I'm noticing these certain kind of attributes. These things are at play. We're not bound by it. It just, you have a high influence of things, I guess you could call it. The zodiacs are part of astronomy. The way that Rambam describes it, it's very interesting. Because I keep going, do we have anywhere where it says what the sun is made of? What is the sun made of? We can't figure it out. It's just a luminary. You have the earth at the center, and there's a verse that says the earth stands forever. The Rebbe was very adamant that that means that the earth actually stands. It's still. The earth does not rotate. Then you have the moon circles the earth, and the sun circles the earth. I just learned recently about the angles. If you have a 360-degree rotation, the moon fills that rotation. The sun may or may not fill that rotation, and it's kind of at an angle the way it circles. So you have each circular, you could have circlings within the circles. Certain planets have moons that circle them, does align with it. You have the moon, the sun, and then Rambam only mentions 5 planets. It's very interesting. Mercury, Mars, Venus. Venus is called Noga, the bright shiny planet. Jupiter, and Saturn. So Neptune and Uranus are not mentioned. Pluto's here, there, and everywhere. If Rambam doesn't mention it, because there's only 9 circles, 9 igulim, 9 circles. So the fact that Rambam doesn't mention it, does that mean that we have also misidentified Neptune and Uranus? Which is possible because we haven't been there. So it is possible that we're not seeing it correctly. And then around that is the sphere of the stars. And the sphere of the stars, you have the zodiacs. The 12 zodiacs are lined up. It's called the Galgal Ayomi. So that turns, and that turns all the other circles. Think of like the outer wheel, the outer cog that turns all the other cogs when it turns. And that makes, there's a day circle. Yomi, it's a daily turning. And the earth is actually the axis of everything spinning around it. What's lined up there is you have the zodiacs. The 12 make up that circle, and then I guess whatever stars is. Between Mars and Venus, Mars and Jupiter, are there any stars in between those 2 planets? Where are the stars? They're not between those planets. As far as we know, according to Torah, all the stars are actually on the outer sphere. It's interesting. So this is kind of what started. We describe the sun as a star, but the sun is not described as a star in Torah. Shemesh. It refers to the sun, moon, and stars. And the sun, moon, and stars are all luminaries. The sun specifically, the sun is a luminary, must shine. Or does it ever say the stars like the sun? As far as I know, it doesn't use that reference. So astronomy, it's vital to know. The holidays must be in their seasons. Even though we have a lunar cycle, you have to know when the leap years are. You have to know when to do a 29-day month, a 30-day month, because most of the months are set, but some of them are not set. There's 2 months that could rotate. And there's a whole system and cycle, which is how you get to the 19-year cycle about how to know when there's the extra days to fill it so that we can eventually align with the solar year. So they have to really know this kind of stuff. You have to understand the cycles of things. The Jewish calendar, the lunar calendar, is not an easy calendar to figure out. Where are we at? We do believe that there are certain attributes, things that play during certain months. Astronomy, yes. Astrology, not really. I went on a whole tangent there. It's so funny because I just say something like, oh, I don't know. Okay, I just saw this other thing was, I don't know if I should add this. But you know what? The Maamar is the Maamar, and we learn basically what's going on in the Maamar, though we're not learning it from the text, but we get the idea of the Maamar. And I was like, and I kind of like keep it open for sidetracks and stuff like that because it's just a way to open up to learn about so many things. Okay, here we are. We just learned all about astronomy. There's so much more to it about what's going on in each month and all that kind of stuff. But again, we say a Jew is not bound by a mazel. Now, we see what a mazel is or what the constellations are for. They're tools for God to send through the spiritual blessings, sustenance, etc. They're basically conduits. Back in the day when people started worshiping them, they forgot that they were a conduit. They instead saw them as things having their own providence, that the conduit can make the decision about whether or not to shine forth. And that's not so, because the conduit is just a tool that God uses. That was actually a sidebar, which led us on to a massive other sidebar. Going back to what the Maamar is saying about how the Gemara says that these things are not dependent on your merits. They're very righteous people who have not always great lives. That would say that your divine service does not necessarily decide these things. Because if that would mean that every tzaddik, every righteous person should have perfect, beautiful lives, and that's not necessarily true. true. And that's not a hard thing to discover. We can see that. So if that's true on this example, then it's true. Why do such good people, and they have things that happen to them, we do not approve of certain things that happen to people. And what is that? So some people, punishment, whatever. Not necessarily. So this is from the Gemara, Boed Katan. Rava said, length of life, children, and sustenance do not depend on merit, but rather they depend upon mazel. As in, whatever your spiritual conduit is. As Rabba and Rav Chisda were both pious sages. One sage would pray during a drought and rain would fall, and the other sage would pray and rain would fall. So we see both of them are very righteous. They could end droughts. They could bring rain down. These are very holy men. And nevertheless, their lives are very different. Rav Chisda lived for 92 years, whereas Rabba lived for only 40 years. The house of Rav Chisda celebrated 60 wedding feasts, whereas the house of Rabba experienced 60 calamities. In other words, many fortuitous events took place in the house of Rav Chisda, and the opposite occurred in the house of Rabba. We see what the effect of both these people are. They can both end droughts, and yet their physical lives were totally different. For whatever reason, God decided these things. In the house of Rav Chisda, there was bread for the finest flour, even for the dogs, and it was not asked after, as there was so much food. Like in the house of Rabba, on the other hand, there was coarse barley bread, even for people, and it was not found in sufficient quantities. This shows that the length of life, children, and sustenance all depend not upon one's merit, but upon mazel. As in mazel, whatever God has decided for your life to be. And the one hand, there's a freeingness to it, where it's just, you gotta do what you gotta do, and everything else is up to God, so don't forget about it. On the other hand, you're like, what is going on here right now? Here's the second one. This is from Masechta Nida. As Rabbi Chanina Bar Papa interpreted that verse of the following manner, that angel that is appointed over conception is called night. And that angel takes the drop from which a person will be formed and presents it before the Holy One, blessed be he, and says before, Master of the universe, what will be of this drop? Will the person fashioned from it be mighty or weak, clever or stupid, wealthy or poor? But this angel does not say, will he be wicked or righteous? This is in accordance with the statement of Rabbi Chanina, as Rabbi Chanina said, everything is in the hand of heaven except for fear of heaven. Kol b'dei shamayim chutz mi'yirah shamayim. People have free will to serve Hashem or not, as it is stated, and now Israel, what does Havaya Elokecha ask of you, other than to fear Havaya Elokecha? V'atei saw ma Havaya Elokecha shel mi'imach kim lira. We actually saw this verse in Tanya, where the Gemara that says, is fear of God such a simple thing? And it's, well, for Moshe it was. And it's like, that's not helpful. So Moshe gives power to all the generations to be able to access. Moshe being the nurturing shepherd gives us a capacity to achieve a certain measure of fear of God in our service of God. That Hashem asks the Jewish people to fear him indicates it's a person's choice. When we see mazel is what decides, and the mazel is something that's set, and you don't necessarily have an effect on it, but we're saying, no, you have an effect on the abundance, what's coming down. It's also, the general idea is no one can really know what the blessings are. You might have massive blessings at Parnasa, amen, that should manifest in this world, and part of the bracha that you give to people is that it should come down to this world. So you get other brachas coming to you and they get stuck up in the higher realms, you'll get them afterwards. But that's not helpful for us here in this world. We want the blessings not just to exist, but to come down to us. And then here it's saying, before a person even goes into the world, there are so many things that are decided for them. Mighty or weak, clever or stupid, wealthy or poor. These are not things that are necessarily under our control. Someone who has a great aptitude for learning, someone else could try really hard. Their efforts are only going to get them so far if they're not necessarily given that sort of brain. There are certain things that are decided before, and there are certain things that are not. Here it's saying what is not decided is fear of heaven, as in your choice of service of God is something that is up to you. And we see that because what does God ask of you? Only to fear him. The fact that God asks it of us means that it's our choice. God doesn't ask other things of you. God doesn't say, the only thing I want from you is to be a smart person. Well, the only God could ask of us is to be moral, because that's the decision that he leaves for us. Obviously, we can disagree with him about what he's decided for certain people, but certain things we have to understand. Everyone has their very specifically designed life course, character and personality and all that sort of stuff that goes along with it, because everyone has a very tailored life journey, very specific to you and to whatever you're supposed to be accomplishing in this world. We'll end off on a cliffhanger of the question, because this is the question we're ultimately building to. So obviously this raises many questions about, so why do people have to live like this? We're not answering that. This is the central question that we are going to answer in the Maamar. Why does the Torah use the word a term of service which seems to only be relevant in the physical world? That you should serve God, and the word of avoda, which we're actually going to see the text for next time. The word of avoda comes from orot avudin, which means tanning hides. That means taking something that's unusable and you're refining it to the point of being able to use it. What we mean by service is something that we're really working on ourselves, to refine ourselves, to make ourselves better. Why is this the condition when it seems like it's something that belongs in this world, not for our relationship with God? A term of service. Now why? Because a servant feels a lack or a need of his master, for this is what a servant is all about. Why are you here? Because I need something from you, whatever it is. Through serving, the servant contributes to the fulfillment of his master, which brings him fulfillment as well. So the servant, I am purposeful, I am doing what I'm supposed to do by serving you, because I'm a servant. My job is to serve. Now, the fact that I serve you means that there's something that I can do that you're not doing or that you can't do. That's why I'm here. So what I do is everybody gets full fulfillment. So if we're looking at that, we're like, what does this have to do with God though? Hashem, however, is perfect, complete, and not lacking for anything. What could we possibly do for him? And you are the completeness of everything. So how then do we serve him? This is the question that we're looking at. God says, I will give you these blessings if you will serve me. Fine. But this is an interesting choice of words, because first of all, we're seeing yes, affected, not affected, where is this all coming in? And not only that, why does it mean that we're serving God? What can we possibly provide to God that he does not already have? The fact that he is God means that he has everything, that he's completely complete. And if that's the case, are we just doing busy work? Servants is just busy work? Or do they actually have an effect? Is there actually an impact that they have? Do they actually do anything for God? That's the cliffhanger question, the main question of the Maamar. Onward and upward, that's what we're going to start discovering.